think the biggest change here is going to be the crowd. Like the stage will be a little bigger, but having a huge crowd being there instead of only a couple people, that's going to be very exciting.
Now, folks, we have everybody taking the stage. They are in front of that crowd, and the question is whether or not that pressure is going to affect them. I know for a lot of people, when you're in scenarios like that, you go to your happy place, whether it's an island in your head.
What's your happy place?
I'm not allowed to talk about it. No. But the thing is everybody has their happy place. And when we talk about Dr. J, his happy place is the J-Crest Manor. Do you think that this map is going to be enough to extend this series? Ironic, do you think that we might actually see something go all the way to game number 3?
These affixes are nasty. I mean, this is anyone's game. Sanguine and Quaking on Tyrannical in this map, people could go instantly down.
All right, we're going to have to see. This would be the first series to go all the way to game 3, but one more time, folks, you need to think about what's on the line. Whoever wins this goes to the grand final.
Oh, I'd love to be able to see some good old J-Crest Manor. And even think about it, Tettles, we've got the only 5-boss dungeon, so it's Tyrannical, of course. It's very tight, narrow corners. We have Sanguine, and we have Quaking at our disposal. And keep in mind, it's not 8.3 Quaking. It's not, nice, safe, friendly Quaking. It's a lot of damage.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
I was talking to Yoda a bit at breakfast this morning. He was like, who picked the affixes for Waycrest? We were just joking a little bit about it.
Smiley face.
It was me. So you actually saw a little bit difference in pulls at the very beginning. You actually saw Method in A did that first pull with all those soul essences, whereas Abracadabra using their shroud, running all the way through, melting off some of that trash and making their way towards Heartsbane Triad. Whereas on the side of Method in A, they kill the trash, they make their way just a little bit behind. Again, we're seeing the exact same compositions coming through. Zamak is on that Mistweaver Monk, JB still on that tried and true Restoration Druid. What do you think about the difference between these two healers inside of Waycrest?
Well, I think in looking at it in particular, the potential for these large-scale pulls is so incredibly high, and it does bode well, I think, much more so for Way of the Crane than it does for taking advantage of the rest of Druid. Well, it does have a strong kit at its disposal. The more that you're going to be able to funnel heavy damage going into some of these bosses is going to be very helpful for it. And I think in many cases you will see a number of moments where it's not quite about just the raw damage healer to healer, because you have to keep in mind there is going to be that 5% Mystic Touch that the Mistweaver does bring. And while you're not having that much physical damage coming out of the Unholy DKs compared to the Outlaw Rogue, compared to the Prot Warrior, it still adds up quite a bit.
Yeah, Abracadabra was playing a very dangerous game there. They actually pulled the Acolyte and some of those Toads into Heartsbane Triad. They made sure that they actually CC'd all the Toads. They killed down the Acolyte. They used their Ring of Peace to be able to keep the Toads at bay whenever they did die, to make sure that they did not heal up Heartsbane Triad, because it would have been very dangerous. Whereas Method in A, electing to not pull any trash currently with Heartsbane Triad. I think a lot of times whenever we have Sanguine on this boss, teams will pull the Acolytes and the Toads in at the very end, but Abracadabra, with all of their cooldowns and Bloodlust, pull it in at the very beginning. Method in A still hasn't even used their Bloodlust, though.
That's true, and it's interesting whenever we start looking at the differences in routes and the potential that's available for Method in A to use their Bloodlust where they want to be able to go, because the next step for them is going to be the Courtyard when the gates open very wide as the last percentages for Sister Malady are ticking down. Abracadabra, they got 2% trash on the board right now, but they are going to be in a great position to make some big noise. That Void Emissary is getting right in their face, and they want to be able to grab a bunch of different mobs. You're seeing Dr. J running away, grabbing some more mobs to him, and you're going to be able to see the Shadow Meld coming out as well. And that's what I think we've been talking about a little bit, is how they're skipping around some of these Void Emissaries in this dungeon.
Yeah, that was actually very well done by Abracadabra, and now they're going really big inside of this Courtyard area. This is the difference between healer damage right here. With this Way of the Crane damage coming in from Zamak, you actually had the double DK as well, dropping all of the mobs on top of that. That was a really, really good Ring of Peace there.
That's right, and that's one of the things about control as well, since we are in that Sanguine and Quaking phase. Now, it's not that it cannot be done on Method NA's side, but it's something that will be a lot more stressful for the group if they're making any wrong moves. You got to keep in mind, JB does have Typhoon at his disposal, so we'll have a similar sort of knockback effect, but it's also one of those things that's like a stopping area, a bit of extra kiting room for the tank, being able to have more control over exactly where those mobs start dropping their Sanguine and making the tank's life easier.
Yeah, Method in A's pathing here is kind of strange compared to what we've actually seen in this dungeon during the regular season. They are actually pulling like a bunch of these witches, all of the captains, and that Void Emissary that we actually do see getting skipped by a lot of teams.
I love this routing right now out of Abracadabra. They pulled it out a little bit in the regular season right now, but they did have Dr. James, the doctor himself, running around, avoiding that Matron, and then pulling the boss with it. But it does look like they're pulling the Matron just a little bit later. Not sure if it's going to be a mistake on their part, because it's very easy for this Matron to be healed up through any of the Sanguine. And Divine is dropping so incredibly low. This is going to be testing Zmok's mana so heavily.
Man,
Look at the kites. Look at the kiting. He's just running around trying to dodge Sanguine Puddles. He's going to have to reset the boss right now. Otherwise, he is going to die.
Okay, so Matron Brindle actually has to get pulled for Soul Goliath to activate. So one of the DPS actually has to pull it, reset her. Oh,
but look at the stacks. She has 5 stacks of the damage buff right now. Divine's got some mighty cooldowns up at the moment, but that's not going to be able to last forever, as I believe she's only at 60% HP, maybe even 70%. So they are really losing out on a lot of options. They opt instead just to drop the Shadow Meld. It will reset Matron Brindle, but right now, their entire route is in shambles, okay? They have to wait for their Shadow Meld to come back, or even a Vanish to come back for the Rogue, because they need to be able to get the reset. So thankfully, Dr. J has it at their disposal, and they need to pull Soulbound Goliath once again, get back to the group, make sure the Vanish or Shadow Meld works properly this time, because that bonus damage from the Matron is not going away.
That was a major blunder. That actually probably costs them like 45 seconds to maybe a minute. Matron Brindle's not supposed to get pulled. I don't actually know what happened. Maybe he got healed by some incidental healing from Zmok right before he actually pressed his Vanish. Maybe he pressed his Vanish a little bit late and maybe walked Matron into the group, but what started off as a really solid play has now propelled Method NA into the lead here.
That's right, and they are still going to be all right a little bit with some of their routing at their disposal. A little too soon to say on that end, because they are going to be able to go back and continue to reset that Matron. But like you mentioned, it just still puts them further behind in a position where they really don't want to be, because they have some tremendous snap potential when they go into Rawl's side.
Yeah, and Method NA here, whenever they actually pulled Soulbound Goliath, they elect to use their Bloodlust there, so they ended up saving it about 5.5 minutes into the instance, which is definitely going to be pretty interesting. Typically, this dungeon has been about somewhere in the range of like 17 to 19 minutes, kind of depending on what affixes are present and that kind of thing. In a Sanguine scenario, they're basically saying with that 5.5-ish minute Bloodlust is that the dungeon's going to be a little bit longer than 15, but it's definitely going to be shorter than 20.
Yeah, at that point, it's just kind of comes down to where Abracadabra is going to be able to make up a lot of that missing percent, how quickly they're going to be able to handle it, because Method NA, that 37% trash right now, and you almost wish that this was going to be a Reaping dungeon. There'd be so much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I actually really like the dungeons that they picked for Reaping, for what it's worth.
That's true. I mean, there's only so much.
Yeah,
there's only so much high trash density that we can get in on it. And we'd love to start seeing some heavy Tyrannical, and also how much people change their routes and how much people have to adjust when the affixes are really rough for them. They're really challenging. I mean, we were looking earlier, a little bit of adjustments for a Taldazar with bolstering, for example, but we weren't seeing too much danger, too much upset coming when you had Teeming and Volcanic going into that last freehold.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what Method NA's pathing is going to be like for the back half of this instance, because they front-loaded this instance so much with all of the trash that they were pulling, unlike any other team we've seen before. They did like a Void... They've done multiple Void Emissaries, and like they did that Captain pull in the corner that Abracadabra skipped, so I think their pathing is going to be pretty interesting, unlike anything we've seen before, whereas Abracadabra taking a little bit more traditional approach that we saw in the regular season.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with time at your disposal and how many times you're trying to reiterate and grow a dungeon's pathing, how much you want to be able to change about it. It's always very important to kind of get a good idea of what's going on, because we're seeing some massive run coming up on the side of Method NA. They might be jumping on to that snap spot right onto the banister right there, so everybody's going to be able to get in and get some massive damage onto these guys. Quaking coming out, so they got to really watch themselves as there's spits on everybody in the group, and lots of room for JV to be pumping out some heavy healing.
I love this play.
Sanguine.
Basically, not only the Sanguine, but the Emissary of the Tides, whenever Nerf jump into that snap spot, Tides won't snap with you, so they'll just like stand there for a little bit waiting. Nerf comes out of the snap spot, then the Tides comes in with the group. So after all of those low health mobs got obliterated by the Unholy DK, Nerf gets out of the snap spot, snaps all of the mobs away from the Sanguine, and now they deal with the Tides with just these Gorgers and these Peasants.
That's right. There's a little bit of issue with some of the Gorgers running over the Sanguine puddles, but they do get it down without too much hassle, and now they just have to deal with some of the little small mobs right now as they get themselves ready for the next pack. I was hoping they'd be able to pull something a little bit more with this or continue chaining, because just killing these off is such an annoyance.
Yeah, I mean, 6 maggots, they probably could chain that. I mean, it can be pretty dangerous, but
I mean, he's good on mana at that point. He was still at like 40-something% mana at his disposal, and you have to be able to find a really good time to proc your staff. I think it's a little bit early at this point, but you're not really worrying about staying at full topped-off mana 24/7 here.
So something that I know that Method NA has been playing around heavily is really like making sure that they have the Unholy DK cooldowns at their disposal. A lot of times people will want to just like hard chain like the whole entire time without these massive damage cooldowns coming through. And I know Method NA is saying that they really have put practice in and making sure that everybody has their cooldowns up.
I love the Sanguine kiting right now. Usually we talk about Unholy DKs getting smashed whenever they take too much aggro off of the tank. Right here, Method NA uses it to their own advantage. They actually let their Unholy DKs generate aggro onto these mobs, get the threat that they need in order to kite them out. That way Nerf is still able to tank Raw. I love the positioning on this one. It's so clean. And it's a tough thing to do with Sanguine.
Yeah, you actually did see a shine go down on the side of Abracadabra as they have just a couple more mistakes. I think
this is a messy pull on the side of Abracadabra. Like, you're seeing Method NA stabilizing as they're bringing down Raw, but Abracadabra's got a lot of work to do onto this one, as that Way of the Crane is just about to fall off for them, and they just need to be able to pump some healing to keep everybody topped.
Yeah, Method NA has definitely been taking a little bit more technical approach to how to deal with this dungeon, whereas Abracadabra has just been, while their pulls have been bigger, they've been sloppy. They had an issue with Matron Brindle getting the 5 stack of that Soul Fetish. They're just having a few issues here as they're finally making it into Rawl's room. So they're at the same point in the dungeon, like geographically. However, Method NA has 76% trash, whereas Abracadabra only has 53.
Yeah, that's right, and pulling more of those emissaries right now. They did have to deal with that Void Emissary in the kitchen, which takes a lot of extra time. I think right now, Method NA is just going through this dungeon with a scalpel. They're having such precision on where the Sanguine is dropping, where are these mobs coming from, and that's something that you expect to be practiced so heavily when we got into Motherlode, and something that was just like, well, I hope that we never have to deal with Sanguine here. Now that the Affix is here at BlizzCon, they've done such a great job optimizing their route accordingly.
Lighty actually tries to grip that peasant out of melee, but unfortunately he just doesn't die too quick, walks back in, drops the Sanguine.
Touches? Yeah, it doesn't touch.
Yeah, it doesn't actually hit Raw, but it reduces the amount of space around the boss's melee, which can actually be really, really annoying. As you see Shakib and Lighty just kind of walking around the boss trying to see where they can stand without taking too much damage, as Raw will be going down in just a couple more seconds.
That's true, and we're also seeing at the start of this pull for Raw, it takes quite a long time, but having that Ursul's Vortex really set them up so well in a big way, because it was allowing them to make sure the DKs were able to kite only in a very specific fashion. If they were moving, for example, towards the tank, if they're going to the other side of the boss, they just snap right back and then be susceptible to the Unholy DK's AoE damage, where they'd hopefully be able to draw threat and then kite them out. So well done.
So they're actually getting a couple of these maggots here at the very end. I think this may actually be all the count that they
Shadow
need.
Meld. Yeah, so they're going to grab that, then they're just going to run and Shadow Meld.
Yep, they're going to make it all the way down to the Lord and Lady Waycrest room, pop their meld. This is why they front-loaded all of their trash like that, so they actually don't have to pull that Huntsman's Lodge area that we actually see a lot of teams normally elect to pull. Instead, they actually just get to go down to Lord and Lady Waycrest's room through that kitchen area pretty quickly here.
I love this routing that they've been doing. They've been so crazy efficient. They're taking their time as well. I love what they did right here. They grabbed the first 3-4 mobs, they got the kicks that they needed, then they grabbed everything else. They're not rushing it, and they're not getting into trouble as a result. Both Unholy DKs are stacked full of runic power, ready to be able to pump some damage into Lord Waycrest as we get started with our 4th boss fight.
It's insane that they actually were able to pull that off without too much Sanguine healing on most of these mobs. That Soul Charmer with the candles cast and with like all the bolts and everything that it does cast can actually be pretty annoying to be able to get out of Sanguine, get out of her candles or something like that. Abracadabra pulling a really sizable amount of trash into Rawl now once he's actually dropping pretty low here. You actually see there is a few Tides emissaries on top of the tank. That could actually be very dangerous for Divine.
That's right, it's a lot of damage, but it does look like they're about to teleport out. 10% left for Rawl, as the group does look to be pretty stable and not having too many issues. They got a couple little mobs left available to them, but they'll cleave it out without too much issue. I think a lot of it was on that Soulbound Goliath, and that starts really putting a lot of pressure on your team when you say, We already know that we're down 1 game, facing elimination. Now we just messed up one of our most precise pulls that had so much riding on it. Now we're in trouble, and I think that definitely got to them there.
Yeah, I mean, this has just been the Method NA show for this match. The first series in Freehold was really, really close, and I feel like if Abra were actually able to pull off some of the strategies that they were trying to do, they would have actually been in a good
They're
spot.
not facing elimination. Oh my goodness. We've been playing so many elimination rounds right now. They would be going down and facing up against later in the series, or they'd be going down to the lower semis as well. So they do still have some life into them, and then that's always a good thing to feel, but they'd also be going up against Method EU a little bit later.
Yeah, and you actually see that Bloodlust timing for Method NA. Now we understand why they actually Bloodlusted on Soulbound Goliath, because it is coming up in 45 seconds. They're probably going to pull all of those...
Everything into Gorak Tool.
Yeah, all of those little guys that do the Shadow Claw into Gorak Tool. JB is going to stand on that spot to where the mobs will not jump away. Those mobs need to be instantly killed, but because it can actually be fairly dangerous for a tank, especially one that doesn't have super sick magic defensives like a Protection Warrior. But then beyond that, just making sure that you blow it up with double Unholy DK. This has been quite the path for Method NA.
It has been very impressive onto that one. And he'll have Last Stand back in time. He's holding on to Shield Wall at the moment, so they should be in a prime position. And looking at how this team has used snap spots and how they have organized the mobs has been so very important, because the Sanguine pools are a nightmare on this boss. So it looks like they've had to spend such a large amount of time practicing to get it ready. Very interested to see how much mana JB's going to get, because he still hasn't procced his staff just yet, and making sure that he's going to get a large proc out of that to make everybody's life easier, and just to be able to start killing off some more of the jailers that are going to spawn, the slavers that are going to spawn from Gorak Tool, making sure he uses the proc for that. That way they don't have to worry about wasting any single target damage and can just focus the boss. Gorak Tool getting pulled right now with Bloodlust going up as Method NA really wants to seal this game.
Yep, and you actually do see JB standing on that little, plant or whatever you actually want to call it, just so that those Gloom Horrors do not jump at him, because it creates a no path available zone. That was actually insane. So while Gorak Tool was casting his ability, they actually walked all of the Gloom Horrors off of the boss. They instantly killed him with both of the Unholy DKs, and now they're just DPSing down Gorak Tool.
That control, man, it's that control when they're grabbing such amazing control from these Unholy DKs, being able to get all the grips that they want. They have to watch if they might have a Sanguine Puddle. Oh, it was just one of the slavers going down, getting any of the fires to be able to kill them off very quickly. When they're able to control the burst damage that's at their disposal, it just has such great results. And look at this, 0 deaths up onto the board. You were saying there's going to be between, what, 16 and 20 minutes, 16, 18 minutes, something like that. They're going to be looking to close it out with maybe 17 and a half.
This pathing has kind of changed, like how you have to think about how Waycrest Manor is done. I don't think they've had any Sanguine healing.
Dr. J has just been evicted. I think he's been evicted from his home onto this one, because Method NA is just pulling up shop as the Gorak Tool drops down to 40% HP, and we are just seeing the dominance that they are able to pull as they're looking to secure their spot towards the Grand Finals.
So is it safe to say this is Method NA Crest Manor, Jack?
It really doesn't have the same ring to it.
I think it does.
Maybe a Crest Man. Oh, okay, we'll figure it out later onto that one. While, of course, they're on their way, and they have plenty of time to practice and get themselves ready as well, because 25% left onto this Method NA, looking to be in a prime position as Abracadabra is just struggling to get past Lord and Lady Waycrest right now. A couple deaths on the board, but just the nerves, the time it took in their routing, the time that they might have wasted from having any Sanguine heals going off. All of these things just continue to snowball as Method NA takes their second victory in the series, and they move on to the Grand Finals.
Method NA Crest Manor. Yeah, you can call the dungeon that, but they've taken a whole lot more, BlizzCon. They've been able to take this stage, and for the first time ever, they are going to be in that grand final now at BlizzCon. This is really just such a new opportunity to see MDI on the BlizzCon stage, and this is the team that just time and time again, they step up at LAN. We talk about, all jokes aside, with that dungeon, how we think Dr. J is going to be able to thrive there. It's a dungeon that he loves. Method NA, though, Zyronic, are going to be able to make that look a lot different than the first map did in the series.
I mean, Method NA, I don't know what it is about them, but they turn it on at LANs. I mean, they haven't been able to take one of our regular cups all season long, but they won the Sydney LAN. They're here in the grand finals of the main LAN through the upper final, which is also something that's eluded them for a long time. These guys are looking great.
I think they just have so much going for them in the way of LAN, but putting a finger on that is always going to be difficult, so let's actually look at what happened here in Waycrest Manor.
I mean, there wasn't a whole lot that was different between the two teams. They went for similar strats the entire time. The crux of this dungeon was the Soulbound Goliath skip, and Dr. J right here, right after he chain hooks, something keeps him in combat with the trash. He's unable to get the Vanish skip off. It pulls this trash into the boss, which they were trying to avoid, and then of course the Soul Fetish goes on Matron after that. They have to reset the boss, they have to reset everything, Shadow Melted off, and that just puts them too far behind in the dungeon. By that point, Method NA was 2 minutes ahead of everything else.
Yeah, I think we can see that here very clearly, and also when we do start to talk about that clutch factor, what is making them so clutch on the main stage. I also do think, in a large part, you have to take into account the amount of testosterone that is pumping through JB's veins. You can see it all over the amount of hair that he's able to produce. And so let's see what JB has to say.
Hey, you guys, I'm here with JB of Method NA. All right, well, we know this season's affix was beguiling, but how was it stepping back and practicing once again for Reaping?
Amazing. If we got any Mythic Plus designers in the house, if you guys just want to just Reaping every season, like I think we're okay with that. So it was good. It was a nice callback, season 2.
Totally agree. Now, you did have a death on the third boss. What goes through your head when something like that happens?
I can't say it on live TV. So what goes through your head is like, wow, that never happened in practice. That's weird. But yeah, you get in the heat of the moment and you start doing stuff and you pull like 10 mobs and you forget that like the tank has to pick them up at some point, and so you just kind of tag them and you forget about it, and then they kill you and you remember that they exist. And so luckily it wasn't anything too big, but
well, that's a good TLDR. Now, anyways, you guys go on to the grand finals. How does that feel?
It's BlizzCon. Like, this is, I know technically we did this last year, BlizzCon, but it was kind of a show match. This is the first real tournament for MDI that we've done here, and so going to grand finals here is just, if you play WoW esports, that's your dream, is grand finals, BlizzCon. We don't have any of those like, I'm doing the 3-2-1 in the backyard shooting hoops things, imagining the NBA finals, but this is about as close as that gets for WoW esports.
All right, well, congratulations once again. We are all very, very excited for you. That was JB of Method NA. Back to you, Rich.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things with that as well, you're kind of starting that tradition, right? When you're up there for the first time, if you're able to pull down the first one, yeah, there was a show match in the past. Yeah, we saw them able to perform in that, but if you win the first BlizzCon on the main stage for MDI, that's something that nobody's ever going to be able to take from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes to show just how well these guys are prepared for this event, how well they're performing so far, and just the feeling that they're setting history, they're setting the tradition, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and now I do want to keep in mind, though, their opponents. That was the only series of the day that's not going to be an elimination series, so we are going to see more from Abra. The question is, what will they be able to do now in the lower side of the bracket? Next up, though, we need to figure out who's going to play against them. Is it going to be Method EU, or is it going to be Buff War? And already we're down to the wire. It's crazy how fast we have been able to move throughout the day. Method NA going to be waiting in that grand final. Just 2 more series before we do get there. And let's talk about this next matchup, though, Teddles. How do you think these two teams actually stack up?
I think in general, Buff War has overperformed expectations coming into the tournament. They've actually looked really, really strong whenever they are playing to their strengths, they're playing their game. They can be very clean whenever some stuff is coming out. They innovate some kind of unique strategies for how they're pathing through some of these dungeons. But at the end of the day, it's just making sure that both sides are clean. I think in general, though, I'd probably put the favor in Method EU versus this matchup.
Okay, so we're going to hear a little bit of a preview coming in from Teddles, but we're going to actually get to see the matchup very shortly here, folks. Already, we know one of the teams that is going to be waiting in the grand final. It is going to be Method NA. We got 2 more series, and then we're going to know who will play against them. Next up, it's going to be Buff War against Method EU. Who will stay in this tournament and who will be sent home? We find out right after this.